We're recording. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today on GSU's Thought Leadership Interview Series. I am Michelle Sabasco, Director of GSU's School of Extended Learning Academic Partnership. And today we're interviewing Professor Jarrod Shanahan from GSU's Criminal Justice Department. Hi, Jarrod.
How's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for being here today. So we've got some very interesting, thought-provoking questions for you today. And so to begin with, we would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are.
Sure. So I teach in the criminal justice program. My research revolves around local jail systems and local practices of policing and the relationship between those things. And I came to GSU last year from New York City, where I had lived, worked, researched, and organized for a decade. And so I'm just now getting to learn the terrain around here. And it's really been wonderful to do so alongside some of these great students that we have at GSU.
That's so awesome. So can you elaborate a little bit and tell us maybe a little bit more about the research that you've done or what you're doing? And how about some data? You got some key points to share with us?
Oh, sure. Well, my research project that I'm wrapping up now, which was also my dissertation, was a social history of the Rikers Island penal colony. So Rikers, the big famous jail in New York that everybody knows about, but few people know very much about at all. And so I have a book about that topic coming out next year, finishing that up now. I guess the data that I could share with you would be the most recent article that I wrote with a colleague of mine, Jean-Darc Curti, on the George Floyd rebellion and all of the street activity and the militancy that's been going on since May. In the early weeks of the rebellion, we sat down and tried to figure out exactly what was going on. I mean, we're both criminal justice scholars, and we understood that there was a very strong abolitionist and reform current to this movement. And so we sat down and tried to figure out exactly what it means for what's going on with the criminal justice system and where this kind of movement is pointing toward in the future. So I'd be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, that is super interesting. So how are you bringing that kind of current event into your classroom? How are you starting up conversations? What are the students coming back to on those topics?
Well, everybody has a lot to say about such a controversial and provocative political moment. What I try to do in my classroom might be a little bit less exciting in the short term, but we try to ground these discussions in an understanding of the history. And so I challenge my students to think that prisons have not always existed. Police have not always existed. These institutions came into being in certain moments of history for very particular reasons. And we need to understand those reasons in order to think critically about the present. And similarly, anything that has a beginning also has an end. And so we can look at the way that these institutions change and evolve in the present and think about how they might actually be done away with.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. So you would say that that's kind of something you're trying to solve in terms of current day problems that we're facing?
Yeah, the main problem that I'm trying to address in my research and that I try to work through in classes with my students is how to start where we are, right? We're in this big mess. Everybody can agree that the justice system is a disaster and it needs to be seriously overhauled. And there's all these people taking the streets, behaving very courageously, demanding change. And so the problems that I try to look at revolve around how we start here where we are and bridge that to a more equitable society and a different way of treating antisocial behavior.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the industry on a whole, what interesting trend have you noticed in criminal justice lately?
Well, I mean, the George Floyd rebellion has really shaken everything up. And I meet a lot of students who just accept on its face the idea that we have a structurally racist criminal justice system. And they accept on its face that the institutions of policing and incarceration are in need of serious structural reform, if not outright abolition. And I can say, I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, I would not have expected to talk to undergraduates in criminal justice who held those views. So I think people are developing a much more critical perspective on the system. I'm meeting more students who are interested in radical change. And I see it as my responsibility to help them make sense of what's going on, understand the history, understand politically what the terrain looks like, in order that that they can take meaningful and deliberate action in shaping the future.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We do need to do that. So, given that answer, how about what is your opinion? What is your opinion regarding what the criminal justice system is going to look like in a year from now, in 5 years, in 10 years? How different do you think it's going to look?
That really depends on people taking action right now, whether they keep the heat on or whether they go home. I mean, if the movement dwindles and we leave it up to the politicians and the nonprofits, then the criminal justice system in 5 or 10 years will look pretty much the way that it does today, except maybe a little bit better in some places and maybe worse in some places. But if we keep up this street activity, if we keep up and bring it into places, into workplaces, into classrooms, into where people live and work, right? We could see a much more equitable distribution of power, a shift away from punishment, from fines, from using police to regulate the lives of poor people, toward what I think a lot of folks are demanding right now, which is meaningful investment and social power given to communities that have been, as this scholar Simon Balto wrote in a recent book about Chicago, simultaneously abandoned and saturated with police.
Yeah, I think equity is super, super important in terms of what the future looks like. So I really hope that, equity is at the base of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here pretty soon, but I'd really like to get your opinion on what has been the most stimulating intellectual experience that you've engaged in the last couple of years.
I would say that it was this summer, just getting out to as much as I could and just watching these young people who are making me feel old, right? But that's fine. These incredibly young people, teenagers, standing up and saying, like, we're not gonna take this. We're not going to accept this society at face value, demanding radical change. Demonstrating great courage in the face of violence from the state, right, and from these vigilantes. And it's been very inspiring to me, and it's been simultaneously humbling. So, I mean, any way that I can help out that activity and help that movement along, I mean, I consider that to be the best contribution I can make.
It has been super interesting. So tell us, in your opinion, why should students choose GSU's criminal justice program?
Well, there's criminal justice programs in just about every college you could find. But what's rare about GSU is you can approach these questions from a critical perspective. And you can take classes that aren't just going to teach you how to be a worker in one of these institutions, though of course you could learn that as well. But you're going to meet professors like me and like some of my great colleagues who are going to challenge you to really think critically about these institutions, and to not take them at face value, and to ask the kind of tough questions that you might not find in a more traditional department. We have a stated interest in social justice, and we take that very seriously.
Yeah, and restorative justice I know is very important to our criminal justice
Yes.
program. So yeah, that, you know, it's critical thinking combined with social justice, restorative justice, and equity are just at the heart of our program and so important. So now we'd like to get to know you a little bit, Jarrod, a little bit more. Can you tell us what motivates you every day?
Sure. I mean, unfortunately, there's no shortage of injustice going around right now, and it can be very despairing to read the news. I know some people who don't read the news at all, right? And unfortunately, I don't consider that a serious option. I think that it's an incredibly dark moment, politically and culturally, but that's just a challenge. It's a challenge to those of us who look around and see that things aren't right, to do everything we can to try and get society on the right track. And it might be despairing for some, but I mean, once you consider it a practical task, then it's just a matter of evaluating your best options and proceeding accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it motivates a lot of us, especially those seeking a degree in criminal justice. I want to thank you so much for your time, Professor Shanahan. This was great. It really has been a pleasure getting to know you and getting to know a little bit more about the criminal justice field that you study. I do want to let our viewers know that GSU offers classes from our Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice at Triton College in River Grove, at Joliet Junior College in Romeoville, at GSU's main campus, and of course, online. If you would like more information on this unique program, feel free to contact me, Michelle Sabasco. I can be reached at msabasco@govst.edu, or I can be reached by phone at 708-235-3983. And I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can see my contact information. Again, it's Michelle Sabasco, msabasco@govst.edu, or 708-235-3983. Thank you again. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me, and I hope that I have someone who's watching this in my classroom in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.